Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to the Education Matters webinar hosted by Congresswoman Adams. My name is Ruben Cedillo, and I handle education policy work for the Congresswoman. And I will be your MC this evening. Today, we'll be talking about everything that's going on with education recently. We're going to talk about education funding, how that's impacting North Carolina, the government shutdown, and what that all means for schools, students, and families. Today, we have a really fantastic panel of education professionals here to talk about the impact that they're seeing on the ground and what we can expect in the next few months. Congresswoman Adams will also give you an overview of everything happening in Congress and how that's going to impact education. At the very end of this webinar, we're going to have a Q&A session. So any questions you may have, please feel free throughout the webinar to drop those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. All right. Well, starting off this webinar is Congresswoman Alma Adams. She represents the 12th District of North Carolina, including Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. She's a co-founder and co-chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, as well as a bipartisan HBCU caucus. Congresswoman Adams, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ruben, and thanks to all of you, all of our guests for joining us today. I'm Congresswoman Alma Adams, and I have the pleasure of representing North Carolina's 12th Congressional District right here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. I do want to thank all of you for attending today's Education Matters, because it does. This webinar does matter to our students, to our teachers, to our families, and to the future of our communities. And so I'm honored to be joined today by an outstanding group of education leaders, Mr. Jeff Coltrane from NCDPI, who spent decades in higher education and workforce development, Dr. Kimberly Vaughn from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, Amanda Thompson, educator and NEA Charlotte president, and Dr. Jerry Wilson from the Center for Racial Equity in Education here in Charlotte. So thank you all. You're going to hear more from these incredible panelists in just a few moments. But let me begin by saying this. Higher education is one of my 4 H's, alongside healthcare, housing, and hunger. And because I know that without education, none of the problems can be solved, because education is the foundation that everything else rests upon. It changed my life. I was a first-generation college student. My mother was a domestic worker who cleaned houses to keep our family fed, working long hours, sometimes 7 days a week, so that my sister and brothers and I could have a better future. We didn't have a lot, but what my mother gave us was the belief that education could open doors that poverty tried to close. And that belief took me from Newark, New Jersey, walking those ghetto streets, to North Carolina A&T State University, where I earned my bachelor's and master's degrees, and it has stayed with me ever since. And that belief took me from Newark, New Jersey to North Carolina A&T, where I earned my bachelor's and master's degrees. And as I said, it has been with me forever. It led me to being an educator of 40 years, helping my students receive the opportunities that they deserve, just as I did. So when we talk about education matters, I mean it, because it's personal. Unfortunately, though, today we're facing an education crisis, and that's a man-made crisis. The government shut down. I'm here in Washington, want you to know that. But it's shut down again because House Republicans have refused to work with Democrats to pass a bipartisan bill that keeps the government open and protects affordable health care. This shutdown has real consequences for our students, our teachers, and of course our schools. It threatens critical federal programs that support college access. It puts pressure on the Department of Education, whose furloughed staff can't process student loan forgiveness, campus funding, or accreditation reviews. And of course, it leaves uncertainty hanging over millions of families who depend on these programs to keep their kids in school. Already, schools serving students on federal lands, like military bases and tribal communities, are feeling the impact. Those schools depend on federal impact aid to operate day to day. And when that money stops, it puts teachers' paychecks and classroom programs at risk. On top of that, the president recently signed what he's calling the One Big Beautiful Bill. Well, I've got to tell you, there's nothing beautiful about cutting opportunities for our students. It's an ugly bill. It's going to hurt a lot of beautiful people, a lot of beautiful students. And so that bill makes nearly $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and other social programs over the next decade. It includes devastating changes to higher education. Starting in July of next year, it caps federal student loans. It eliminates Grad Plus loans, and it slashes support for low-income and first-generation students who are trying to attend college. It raises taxes on university endowments, and it restricts Parent Plus loans and forces schools to pass a so-called earnings test. And that could cut off entire programs from federal aid, including at HBCUs, at community colleges, and regional public universities. These changes, of course, will hurt our students, but it'll hurt our schools, and it'll hurt our economy as well. And so for states like North Carolina, where we rely on public institutions like North Carolina A&T, UNC Charlotte, Central, and our community colleges to train the workforce of tomorrow, it's going to be devastating. Because without action, fewer students will be able to afford higher education, faculty and staff could face cuts, and the cost of a college degree will only rise. I think about W.E.B. Du Bois's words all the time, who said of all of the civil rights for which the world has struggled and fought for 500 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. So let me be clear. Education should be a public good, not a private privilege. And we can't balance the budget on the backs of our students. And we can't fund tax breaks for the wealthy by cutting Pell Grants and student aid. And we cannot claim to care about the economy while we're defunding the very institutions that drive it. So tonight's discussion couldn't come at a more critical time. We'll talk about what this shutdown and this so-called beautiful bill will mean for education in North Carolina, from early childhood to higher education, and what we can do to protect our students and our schools. Because as your representative, I want you to know this. I'm not going to stop fighting for public education, for our teachers, for our schools, and for every student who deserves the same opportunity that I had to learn, to grow, and to succeed. Education is non-negotiable. And so it's the key to everything else that we value as a nation. And so as our community continues to navigate the impacts of the government shutdown, and hopefully it won't be shut down much longer, we want to shut the shutdown, but I want you to know that my office is here to help. And whether you're having trouble reaching a federal agency, not receiving federal services, or if you're dealing with any other effects of the shutdown, please reach out to my Charlotte or my DC office, and my staff will assist you however they can. You can contact my Charlotte office at area code 704-344-9950, or my DC office at 202-252 251 202-225 2510. I think I had number 225-2510. So thank you again for joining us for this important discussion. I look forward to hearing from our guests and answering your questions. Thank you very much. Ruben, back to you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Our first speaker following you is Jeff Coltrane, again, Senior Director of Government at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and former Senior Education Advisor for Governor Roy Cooper.
Good evening, everyone. Congresswoman Adams, thanks for having me on tonight and for hosting this very important discussion. I think you summed it up well. Education matters immensely, not just for our children, but for the future of our state. And so thanks for hosting this discussion. I just want to provide a quick overview of some data at the state level about our schools in North Carolina, and then give some information on some of the impacts we're seeing from the federal shutdown, and then some priorities that Superintendent Green and the State Board of Education have laid out. But first, I always like to start with a reminder that our state constitution guarantees the right for every child in our state to the privilege of an education. And that constitutional guarantee is in two provisions in our state constitution, both the right to an education, but also that the state should guard and maintain that right and should fund that right. These constitutional provisions have been the basis for our long-running Leandro school finance lawsuit. And what's interesting about these provisions in our state constitution is that they were actually added in 1868, just after the Civil War, in response to the General Assembly in 1866 actually abolishing our public school system because they did not want to have to educate freed slaves. And so our constitutional writers at the time wrote the right to an education into the Constitution so that all students, no matter if they had been slaves or free, were eligible to get an education. In North Carolina, our public schools serve just over 1.5 million students across about 2,700 schools. About 2,500 of those schools are our traditional school district schools, including the schools in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. We have about 208 charter schools as well. We also have several non-public schools, a little over 900 private schools, and then 101,000 home schools. But I think the key takeaway here is that 84% of all school-age children in North Carolina attend a public school. And that's the families have chosen with their feet their local public school, and the superintendent and the State Board of Education are going to work to make sure that even more families are choosing our public schools in the future, because we know that they are the best option for all students. To talk a little bit about funding for our public schools, about 2/3 of funding for all public schools in North Carolina comes from state resources. The state spends about $12.5 billion a year on supporting our public schools. About 25% or so comes from local sources, so mostly counties, funded by county commissioners. And we get just about 11% from the federal government. I think that's the key part we'll want to talk about tonight, is that 11%. That 11%, though, is a $1.1 billion investment that we get from our federal government in education, which we'll talk a little bit more about tonight. Amazingly, as you could imagine, about 93% of all state funding for our public schools goes to support educators, salaries and benefits. It's a very human capital intense endeavor to educate our children. And so most of our funding actually goes to pay salaries and benefits for our educators, so that we have good educators in our classrooms. We'll talk a little bit more about sort of what salaries look like in just a second. In terms of that federal education funding, as I mentioned, about $1.1 billion comes to our state in federal education funding, and that mostly goes to help provide educational services for specific groups of students. Our students with disabilities, it's about $375 million a year. Students from low-income families, English language learners, students who are homeless, and other support programs is about $670 million, and then career and technical education is about $43 million. In addition to that 1.1 billion, our public schools also receive more than $525 million a year from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to provide school breakfast and lunch to our students. That obviously is a big, big support to families, and making sure that students receive healthy school breakfast and lunches. We know with the during the shutdown that the Department of Agriculture has announced that SNAP benefits are going to expire on November 1st. And so obviously this is going to be even more important if those benefits do lapse. Attorney General Jeff Jackson today did file a lawsuit along with 22 other states to force the Department of Agriculture to continue those benefits after November 1st. The big thing out of that federal education funding is that a lot of it also goes to hire individuals. So we have almost 14,000 educators in our public schools across the state whose salaries and benefits are paid for with federal funds. And that is probably the biggest takeaway in all of these discussions about federal education funding, is that this money is critical to helping to support our students, to helping make sure that those students with special needs get the services they need, but also it's a big employer component. Our public schools are the largest employer in 40 of our counties. They're the third largest employer in 80 of our counties, and they're a top 5 employer in all 100 counties. So losing federal education funding would not just be a harm to our students, but also a big impact on our local economy. Thankfully, the shutdown has not had any impact on our current federal education funding. The funds that we receive to support all of those students, our schools are still receiving, and we're able to continue to provide those services. Where we have seen a little bit of a disruption is in some school nutrition funding. We have been receiving some funding from the Department of Agriculture, but we haven't received everything we need to help cover the cost of meals coming into the next month. The other big area that we're starting to see an impact in is actually not in K-12, but in our early childhood programs. So the Department of Public Instruction manages the Head Start, the state's Head Start Coordination Office. And we've started receiving word from about a half dozen Head Start programs that as of November 1st, several of them are going to have to shut down operations because they're running out of federal funding. And at this point in time, they're not receiving any additional funding. On the latest count, just over 1,900 children served by Head Start programs across the state could be impacted, and more than 600 staff members could be temporarily furloughed. We are working to raise this issue with staff, with the governor's office, with our Office of State Budget Management, and of course with federal partners to make sure that they're aware of the challenge of this. I think nationally we've heard that more than 65,000 children who get serviced in Head Start could be impacted by this lapse in funding coming up here shortly. I just wanted to talk for just a few minutes about some of the priorities of Superintendent Green and the State Board of Education in terms of helping to support and strengthen our public schools across the state. In August, the superintendent and the state board adopted a strategic plan for our North Carolina public schools called Achieving Educational Excellence. This plan has 8 pillars of actions, which we'll talk about in just a second. But the vision for the plan is achieving educational excellence, which has 3 components: high academic achievement for all students, character education for all students, and then third, that by 2030, North Carolina will have the best public school system in the nation. And the strategic plan lays out a series of measures that we're going to be looking at, including high school graduation rates, our NAEP scores on 4th and 8th grade math, advanced placement course participation and performance, as well as CTE for technical education participation, that we'll be looking to measure how we're going to determine that we're best in the nation in 5 years. But across the plan, as I mentioned, there's 8 pillars of work. You can see them listed here, including preparing each student for the next phase of life, revering our public school educators, and enhancing parent, caregiver, and community support, as well as really lifting up our public schools through celebrating the excellence in public education and galvanizing champions to and fully support and invest in our public schools. Across these 8 pillars, there's 110 actions, and the superintendent and the state board are already getting to work on several of those actions that we'll be carrying out over the next 5 years to really strengthen our public schools. But one of those actions, which has really been a key area of focus for the superintendent this year, is on raising teacher pay. to be the highest in the Southeast among our southeastern states. Obviously, we compete with a lot of our neighboring states like Virginia and South Carolina and Tennessee for educators. And we've got to make sure that our teacher pay is as competitive, if not better, than those states. But sadly, we have been falling further and further behind our peer states. Based on the most recent national rankings from the National Education Association, which is from the 23-24 school year, North Carolina ranks 8th in our average teacher pay, behind some of our neighboring states like South Carolina and Tennessee and even Alabama. And in beginning teacher pay, we rank 10th out of our 12 states, behind most, if not all, of our neighboring states there. And so we've been slipping further and further behind these rankings. We used to be even higher in the previous year. And so the superintendent, the state board, have been calling on the legislature to make much needed investments in raising teacher pay. Governor Stein proposed a 10% pay raise for educators this year. We didn't quite see that out of either of the houses of the General Assembly, but we still do not have a state budget. And so we have not seen any meaningful raises in teacher salaries over the course of this year. Ruben, I'm going to stop there and look forward to the Q&A discussion later, but happy to take questions later on.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for that great overview. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kimberly Vaught, Assistant Superintendent of School Performance at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. Dr. Vaught has served 24 years as a classroom teacher, teacher coach, and school principal, with a proven record of converting low-performing schools to the highest-ranking schools in the district and state with just one academic year. Dr. Vaught, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruben, and thank you so much, Congresswoman Adams, for the honor and the privilege to share space with these absolute outstanding folks who are committed to do what's right for public education and certainly for the future. As Ruben has said, my name is Dr. Kimberly Vaught, and I very, very proudly serve in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. I am a native North Carolinian and have 2 girls, one at one of our Chapel Hill and then one in 10th grade. And so this is more than just an opportunity for a career for me. This really is personal as a mom and an educator. And so just as I think about thoughts and as I thought about our time together tonight, one of the things that I've always said is that children should never, ever be the bearer of the burdens of adult decisions. And this is a simple truth that has grounded my work. I think Ruben talked a little bit about, Mr. Cedillo talked a little bit about my work in school turnaround and comprehensive improvement in the 2nd largest district in the state. But that truth has always been sort of my guidepost, if you will, as I think about the work that we do with children here in public education. And the truth is that this is also what keeps so many educators showing up, even when systems around us may feel uncertain. Because it has certainly been my experience that I've learned that a shutdown certainly may pause budgets. But I was in classrooms today and learning has not paused. Educators have not paused. Folks have not stopped showing up for work. And every policy decision, whether that's at the federal level, the state level, or the local level, eventually lands in the brick and mortar, not of a school, but in a classroom, right? Where we have our most prized citizens, our children, our future. And when systems stall, schools, teachers, principals, superintendents continue to show up because that's what we've always done and that's what we'll continue to do. And truly, that's the heartbeat of public education. This notion of resilience and this notion of responsibility and an unwavering belief in the potential of every child, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their entry point, regardless of their history. We know that they all have what we call bright futures, right? Regardless of what has happened yesterday, we know that it is up to us to certainly link arms and make sure that they have a bright future. Had an opportunity not long ago to learn from a scholar that said, why certainly now children, our young people are about 20% of our population, but 100% of our future. And so no matter what's happening beyond our school doors, educators, I will tell you, just being boots on the ground every single day with some of the hardest working educators in the state, we're still opening our school doors and we're still teaching kids and kids are still showing up. But with all that being said, we know that uh, even resilience has its limits. And a government shutdown doesn't just freeze funding. It begins to shake the very foundation of stability for, the children that depend on it the most, right? It delays reimbursements for potentially delays, reimbursements for meals that feed our children and stalls grants that train our teachers and interrupt programs that lift students who are what we call the most marginalized, the most vulnerable. Our students, I like to say, who are most at promise. I know that some folks refer to our students who, may come from disenfranchised background as at-risk students, but we like to refer to our babies at the ones who are most at promise. And so these federal education dollars, I believe that our last panelist talked about, somewhere between 8 to 12% of our K-12 budgets. But those are, the most purposeful, targeted dollars that we have. So, for instance, our Title I funds, they are the funds that go to support our students in poverty in our highest poverty schools. And they sustain our IDEA, ensuring that students with disabilities receive the supports and the services that they so aptly deserve. These funds, anywhere from 8 to 12%, depending on the county and the district, empower Title II, right? Developing and retaining our strong educators who show up every single day. And so when that funding stops, as a seasoned educator, even briefly, I realize that it's not just a spreadsheet problem. It's not just a calculator problem. It's not just crunching numbers, but it truly is. It's about a child losing their reading intervention. It's about a paraprofessional or K-3 instructional assistant being unsure across our state if their position will be funded. It's about a teacher who is really concerned or waiting for training that could change how they grow and nurture and support and serve as a catalyst for that struggling learner. So, I think Mr. Cedillo talked about the fact that I've had an opportunity to live this work. And I've had the good fortune, the opportunity of a lifetime to, lead some of our schools who were once identified for comprehensive improvement. And I will tell you that that work has not been an overnight effort, right? So moving schools, some of the lowest performing schools in the state, from F's to B's, from the lowest performing to the highest performing. We rebuilt those schools brick by brick and step by step through collaboration and coaching and a relentless belief in what was possible. And those schools, we were able to move from what we call doubt to determination, and from determination to measurable success. And that's what we're talking about tonight. And what really made that transformation possible were the targeted supports, and many of those, Congresswoman Adams, that were federally funded, that allowed us to extend learning time for our students. So, having those after school opportunities for our students who needed it the most, investing in opportunities for literacy, right? Not just for literacy at the classroom level, but to develop the capacity of our teachers to be experts and to not only diagnose, but to make sure that they had the training and the professional development and that their capacity was continually being stretched and enlarged to be successful as they practice every day. We were able to, use those tools and funding to provide that training. And so, I worry that, having the good fortune to work with those populations and communities and students across the Western Corridor now, North Carolina, it really wasn't about politics. And I think we're making this about politics. This was really about purpose. It's really about purpose. And so that's why, for me, stability matters. And when agencies like the Department of Education or the USDA or Health and Human Services, furlough staff, I want for our participants tonight to hear me say that the ripple is immediate, right? So approvals begin to stall and reimbursements freeze and technical supports that my child, your child, our children rely on may disappear when we need it the most. And I think I started off tonight by saying that certainly educators will always, always show up. That's what we've always done. They always have, and we always will. But we should not have to carry this weight of uncertainty alone. Our students deserve a system that is steady, that is dependable, and as determined as they are. Because when our classrooms are stable, when our teachers are supported, when our school districts are well funded, when we work as a team and across lines, our children thrive. And when our children thrive, our nation is able and better positioned to move forward. So this is, I'm thankful for this conversation tonight. Congresswoman Adams, thank you for your years of service and your boldness. I want you to hear me clearly say that educators, we will continue to fight. We will continue to stand up. But I want to make sure, once again, that our children aren't casualties of decisions that adults are making today. 20% of our now, but 100% of our future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Val. I really appreciate you for speaking here with us for today. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Thompson, a secondary math specialist in Charlotte with nearly 18 years of experience in the classroom, and also the president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Association of Educators. Ms. Thompson, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so very much. First of all, Congresswoman Adams, for curating this space tonight. To esteemed guests I get to be on a panel with, and of course, people in the audience. Now, Ruben, don't cheat me my years. This is my 22nd year in education, so I'm closer to retirement. So you want to keep all those years, but I'm definitely grateful to be here. But as you said, I am a secondary math curriculum specialist. I'm also the president of the largest labor union, the local affiliate of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Association of Educators, a part of NEA. And most importantly, I am a proud public education product. I'm also a proud public education parent. I have a daughter who is currently in the 9th grade. Talking about the government shutdown. Shutdowns do not stop school. Teachers don't stop, students don't stop. But what we're seeing the effects. Here in Mecklenburg County, the impact is deep. We have seen it before in 2020 with COVID. In CMS, we have over 140,000 students that rely on schools every day, not just for learning, but for meals, and of course, for that sense of community and safety. Our schools, we know, are definitely the nucleus of every community, and when they hurt, everything around them hurts too. Our educators, who are the heartbeat of that, we have a strong heart, but under the pressure, even strong hearts sometimes weaken. The shutdown that has furloughs and some of our most essential workers, that affects our families. It also affects the funding, that affects who is hired and what programs can be consistently sustained. Federal programs like the Title I, Head Start, and special education grants that may be frozen. This means fewer reading supports, delayed tutoring pay, and then also council training and PD for our educators. This devastation isn't just financial, you guys, it's emotional. And I can tell you, I am exhausted. We are all exhausted, trying to do the right thing, but still being left behind. And when those funds stop, it ripples straight into the homes. On November the 1st, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little scared, I'm frustrated, and I'm definitely worried because those SNAP benefits will run out, leaving 600,000 children in North Carolina without food assistance, including 40,000 infants under 18 months old. Even some of our staff in CMS are on those benefits and may also lose those benefits as well. What do we do? Those are not just numbers. Those are children from the Crescent and from the Wedge, kids walking into our classrooms hungry and tired, parents who are frustrated, and empty refrigerators and loss of medical benefits. We are in a crisis. Hungry kids can't focus, worried teachers cannot rest. This is not just a funding issue, it is a moral one. But here's what makes me proud. As an educator, you know, we always show up. Educators, churches, and community partners are trying to fill the gaps, delivering groceries, organizing coat drives, and helping families. We have learned that when systems fail, The people always step forward. But let's be clear, resilience should not ever be the plan. We are tired of carrying this weight. Compassion shouldn't be our budget. Our schools deserve stability and not to always be in survival mode. Here's truth to power. The shutdown isn't just about budgets. It's about values and priorities, whether you have an R beside your name or a D. Our students cannot learn in this instability of our schools, in the community, and definitely not in our homes. Our educators, from our teachers, our bus drivers, custodians, central office staff, cannot leave, cannot learn, and cannot grow on empty. When the schools, the nucleus of our communities, lose funding, the whole system, we've seen it before, you guys, it trembles. But here's hope. In this moment right here, it is a clear reminder, you guys, that voting in every election matters. Every time I speak to people, I say we have to vote. Our power is not only in our advocacy, but it's definitely in our vote. Not just for the president, not just for school boards, county commissioners, but especially in our judges too. We need people in power who make policies, who are not just a mouthpiece for justice, but those who are willing to fight relentlessly, like of course, my Congresswoman, Alma Adams. Every seat shapes tomorrow's future for our children. Every ballot protects our classrooms and our most vulnerable in our homes. Every vote definitely builds our future. Right now, we have the power. On November the 4th, and right now, while early voting is happening, please go and vote and continue to vote in every election from now on because our students need it and we all deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson, for your time and service to our schools. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jerry Wilson, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Center for Racial Equity in Education here in Charlotte. Dr. Wilson is a former educator for the Chicago Public Schools, and a lot of his work centers on teacher diversity and representation, the politics of education, civic learning, and the educational experience of marginalized students. Dr. Wilson, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ruben, and thank you, Congresswoman Adams. I appreciate the invitation and all the wonderful work that you do for education, particularly for our HBCUs. So at CREED, we work to ensure that North Carolina public schools are equitable, fully funded, welcoming, and affirming spaces for all students. But the reality is that resources are not equally distributed across families, communities, or schools. There are some schools that have an abundance of materials, technology, and well-prepared educators, while others don't have these things. Oftentimes, schools with high numbers of marginalized students, like Black and Brown students, students with disabilities, those from families with low incomes, and multilingual learners, they've been deprived of resources and opportunities. So CREED released a report earlier this year by a researcher named Chris Nordstrom that looked at educational funding equity 3 different ways. And the report basically found that North Carolina school finance system remains inequitable for students from families experiencing poverty, Black students, Latinx students, multilingual students, and students in counties with low district wealth. And these inequities have remained largely consistent over the past decade. So one tragedy of this government shutdown is that the Trump administration's recent attempt to lay off hundreds more public servants from the U.S. Department of Education, many of whom worked in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and the Office of Civil Rights. Each of these offices has a crucial mission to ensure that marginalized students are being protected and provided with equal educational opportunities. It was bad enough that these public servants were furloughed, but firing them poses a serious threat to educational equity for families and communities across the country, including North Carolina. As Amanda mentioned, the lack of funding for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, will result in lots of students arriving at school distracted by hunger and leaving school uncertain if they'll have dinner that night. So one place where we've seen federal policy and policymakers in North Carolina converge, unfortunately, before the government shutdown. But again, given the cuts to these offices that support marginalized students, it's really crucial that we point out just how disastrous attempts to outlaw diversity, equity, and inclusion will be for education equity. So the Trump administration has cut grants and censored universities and gutted the US Department of Education. But lawmakers in North Carolina have passed legislation that would criminalize diversity efforts and prohibit schools and colleges from even having offices that address diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, Thankfully, Governor Stein has vetoed this legislation, but lawmakers are still attempting to override the veto. Um, so even though the legislation is not law, the chilling effect is real and has already started being felt in classrooms across the state. As a result, policymakers, school leaders, families, and educators will all need to begin asking tough questions of themselves and each other to ensure that we are serving all students and providing the high quality education that students are constitutionally uh, entitled to in North Carolina. This is true for the youngest students and the oldest students in our systems. Jeff mentioned disruption to Head Start. You know, high quality early childhood education is a powerful force for improving life opportunities for young people. Um, Receiving high quality early childhood education is associated with greater academic achievement, higher graduation rates, and as adults, those young people have better job opportunities and reduced involvement with the criminal justice system. So it's really sad to think about just how much education equity will be impacted, not only by the shutdown, but by some of the policies that we've seen coming out of Washington and Raleigh. And it really is urgent that we act now to make sure that our students are protected and receive all the resources that they need to thrive and grow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson, for sharing these important perspectives. So everyone, we're gonna go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. I wanna make sure we gave you all enough time to ask and answer your questions. And for the first question, the matter of equity in education has existed way before the disastrous decision of the current administration. Many educators have been pushed out of the field too. What are some ways we could provide solutions and protect communities in North Carolina? I'll open it up to any of our speakers that would like to speak on this.
Yeah, so I'm happy just to say a little bit. So there are lots of factors that encourage educators to leave a classroom. And Amanda knows these well. But oftentimes it's the working conditions. It is rarely ever the students that cause educators to leave. It's the working conditions. And right now, I think it's important to note that not only are educators expected to work for very little pay in North Carolina, not only are they expected to work with uncertain expectations around how honest they can be in their teaching and how accurate their curriculum can be when it comes to history. We also have potentially laws that will ban diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that all of these factors have created a really, really difficult situation for all educators, but for educators of color in particular, this is a very, very challenging moment. And if we hope to close opportunities gaps, if we hope to provide every child with a high quality education, the research shows that educators of color have a profound impact on the experiences of all students, but particularly students of color. So we should be doing all that we can to ensure that educators feel safe in the classroom and feel supported in the classroom and well compensated for the amazing work that they do every single day. And that's at every level. That's at the school level, right? That's at the district level, and certainly at the state level, with lawmakers in Raleigh needing to step up and pay our educators what they deserve.
Thank you for beginning the conversation, Dr. Wilson. You know, I call you Jerry, Dr. Wilson. But I think the biggest thing is that, A, we have to name a thing a thing. I think sometimes people don't talk about it. So thank you for bringing it up. And I think that we cannot be afraid to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion because it affects all educators in our classrooms. I think that first of all, we also have to listen to educators. For us to really stop the attrition rate of people leaving their classroom or leaving from being a bus driver, we have to say, hey, what's going on? How can I keep you here? I do think that CMS is, we are trying, they are trying. I'm speaking for we and they because I'm in it. I'm a part of our external equity committee where I'm on the HR team, and we're focusing on how are we making sure educators stay in their profession. And so we have a department, our retention and recruitment department, that is focusing on listening to our educators and building things such being creative things such as housing, you know, figuring out creative ways to give housing to our educators. We're also looking at how can we protect the educator pipeline. I think that respect for education is going to be what really keeps us there, and also pay. And it cannot be about politics. We got to figure out what policies are going to sustain the schools that our students need. And so I think that we also have to understand mental health is not just something we say. We have to invest in it, not only for our students, but of course for our educators and their caretakers that support them as well. So we have to be creative in how we're doing those things as well.
And I would also say, just as a native North Carolinian, and my mom says an educator from her womb, I always knew that I wanted to be an educator. As I think about just the state, not the state North Carolina, but the state, the context that we find ourselves in, there's something about the human condition where folks want to win. And so while our system is certainly built on what we call supposed meritocracy, right? We know that that is not what is always valued. And so I would certainly agree with Ms. Thompson and Mr. Wilson. We don't compensate our educators as they should be. What we call a living wage is not a living wage, as we know, we know teachers that have, second jobs, certainly our paraprofessionals and our support staff. So that certainly is one piece of it. But I would also say that contextually, this is more systemic than teacher pay, teacher compensation. This is certainly a societal concern, a community concern. So as I think about just the region that we find ourselves in, thinking about how we might work with different entities and organizations. So Department of Human Services, or as we think about our hospital systems and our banking systems and all the pieces that make this ecosystem in which our teachers, our students, our schools thrive. This has to be a conversation that is opened up. Even I think about like the linkages and the partnerships that we have with our pre-service, as I think Ms. Thompson talked about, our educator pipeline, right? So thinking about how we prepare teachers. So when I started teaching in 1999 in Brunswick County, it certainly was a different context, right? Certainly there was accountability. Certainly there was the need to learn, how to build positive or strong classroom cultures, but nothing could prepare us, right? Or could prepare me for the context in which we find ourselves in 2025. And I think that we are still using some of the same tools and programs and curriculum pathways that we used, back in 1999. And so as people evolve, as the human condition and the human spirit becomes stronger, wiser, I think that we have to think about this more systemically around not just, educators of color, but how do we help all of our educators win when we think about, just opportunities for outcomes for students. A wise mentor told me, Kim, we go to church to worship. We certainly go to the mall to shop. We go to the grocery store to buy groceries. We go to the bank to transact finances. We come to school to get outcomes for kids, right? And so as we think about just, educator efficacy and helping them to not just have quick wins, but sustainable wins, and bringing what I call dignity, right, back to the classroom, right? And owning our work professionally, all of those things that we are talking about as educators. I think it's a systemic issue. I think that it starts what we call from the cradle, to graduation. And so it's systemic as we think about just there are systems for rewarding and meritocracy and compensation. But we know most educators when we sign up for Education 101, we know that we probably are not going to, become wealthy or rich, and we will probably lead, meager lifestyles based upon our noble profession, our most worthy profession. And I think that there's something about the warrior spirit of an educator that we want to win. And so how do we help every school win? How do we make sure that we get outcomes for all kids? How do we build the capacity of our educators so that they are efficacious in their efforts in every classroom with every child, regardless of their entry point, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their past year's experience, regardless of who their mom or dad is, regardless of their poverty level or level of affluence? When we help educators win, there's something about the human spirit. We want to win. And once we win once, we want to win again and again and again. And our children in our state certainly will be the benefactors. There are some things in our secret sauce that I think that we're missing. We talked a little bit about educator preparation and those pathways around how we, support our beginning teachers, right? Those who raise their hands and they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as they enter the classroom for the first day. How do we support those folks, right? To make sure that we get them from that the 180th day of school feels like that first day of school for every educator in our state. So I definitely think it's a systemic conversation that we have to have. It's not just, this notion of public education, but this ecosystem in which we find ourselves certainly has to be brought to the forefront, from, our hospital systems to our social services, to banking, to our faith-based groups. This is certainly an issue that has many legs, many prongs, and tentacles that will choke us if we don't do something and do something now. So
I want to agree with everything that my fellow panelists said. I think teachers are the most important thing in our school systems. They're the top factor in terms of raising student achievement, and they need to be compensated in a way that's going to make sure that they can live, productive lives, but also that's worthy of the work that they do. As I shared earlier, we've fallen behind a lot of our neighbor states. South Carolina, Alabama, and Tennessee have made significant investments in teacher pay over the last several years, boosting average salaries and beginning teacher pay. And as Dr. Wilson said, our school finance system is woefully underfunded. We're 48th nationally, looking at per pupil spending, almost $5,000 less than the national average. And if you look at the effort that we put in, so how much money we could be providing our public schools if we had a fair tax rate, we're ranked 49th. And so with just some fair taxes and then some meaningful investments, we could do so much more for our teachers, which would result in more outcomes for students. I think the other thing, and this is a key part of the strategic plan that I mentioned that Superintendent Green and the state board have laid out, is Superintendent Green set a goal that every student will graduate from high school in North Carolina having completed a college level course, so an advanced placement or a dual enrollment course with our community colleges, a career connected course, so like a career and technical education or JROTC, and with a service learning component. And I think he's really trying to sort of raise that level of achievement, that excellence that we're expecting. And so I think we've got to invest in our teachers, but also making sure that we're holding all of our students to the excellence that we expect, and then providing them the supports to get there.
And the only thing I'll add to part of the question on inequities in education, because of the cuts we're seeing at the federal level, we're beginning to see more restricted access to higher education. And the fact of the matter is we need more funding, not less. So it's a huge concern, and it's something Congresswoman Adams is going to continue to try and address in Congress. Thank you all for your comments. The next question is for you, Congresswoman Adams. What can Congress people feasibly do to push for more than just a couple concessions in the big, beautiful bill? Can you push for anything more, particularly the destruction of the Department of Education, to seize as part of the Democrats' demands for ending the shutdown?
Thank you for the question. It's an important one, and thank you all for the comments that you've made. I agree with you 100%. It's a tough question. The president and his allies wrote this big, beautiful bill. That's what they call it. I said there's nothing beautiful about it. It was designed to really cut the Department of Education and roll back decades of progress. Now, we're pushing back, but we're operating in a divided government. So that means that it takes real pressure and public engagement to move this needle. As an educator myself, 40 years or more, I certainly, it just stresses me out to think that people who are supposed to be elected, who are elected, would want to disband the Department of Education. Of course, getting rid of it in terms of taking it completely out would have to be an act of Congress. But of course, you can do a lot of other things to create a situation where it doesn't work well. I mean, firing half of the staff and all the things that we've seen. And so right now, our focus is on keeping the Department of Education open and functional, because if it collapses, that means that every student and every teacher and every school that depends on federal support will feel it. So we're working to tie any budget agreement to restoring full funding for the department and protecting student aid, Pell Grants, and civil rights enforcement. So while we have this issue of healthcare in front of us, the situation around the department or closing the Department of Education actually began with that big ugly bill, and so did the issue around healthcare. And so we've continuing to do that. I've been talking with my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus and on the Education and Workforce Committee, of which I sit on, to make sure that the issue doesn't get buried in the negotiations. So once we're able to get into those negotiations, we're going to continue to push for accountability, for oversight, hearings, and legislative fixes to really reverse the harmful cuts in this bill. So yes, we're fighting for more than just concessions. We're fighting to stop the dismantling of public education in this country, because really, when you think about it, it isn't about politics. It's about protecting students and families and the promise of equal opportunity. And I just continue to dwell on the words of W.B. Du Bois, who said, of all of the civil rights for which the world has struggled and fought for 500 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. Indeed, it is. So just know that we're going to keep fighting until we can't fight anymore. But this is a very critical time. That's a very crucial issue. But I thank you all for all of the commitments that you've made to ensure that our kids, all of our kids, have an equal opportunity. And listen, I agree with you. DEI, those are not bad words. Those are good words. Diversity is our strength. Equity is what we ought to be about in terms of leveling the playing field for everyone, and inclusion. Everybody needs to be at the table.
Absolutely. And thank you again to Congresswoman Adams and to our speakers for sharing your perspectives tonight. If we weren't able to get to your question, we will make sure to get back to your question. And as always, please feel free to reach out to our office for any help.
Ruben, can I jump in for one moment?
Of course, Congresswoman.
Because so many people have reached out to the office about student aid. They're worried about their financial aid and student loans. And some have asked if families should be filling out the FAFSA or making loan payments right now. My answer would be yes. Continue to complete the form, make your student loan payments. Most of the federal student aid contact centers, including the main helpline, they're still open. They're taking calls. That number is 1-800-4-FED, and we can put it in the chat so people can get it. They're still open. They're taking calls, and that means that students can still fill out the FAFSA check their loan information and reach out if they need assistance. So I just wanted, because I know that parents are worried, students are worried. And so now that some offices inside the Department of Education are closed, that means that because of this shutdown, it might take longer to resolve certain issues or get the paperwork processed. But I do want the families to think about not stopping what they're doing, continue to make the applications and so forth for the Pels, for the loan disbursements, and phosphor processing should still be moving forward. So I thank you all so very much. Ruben's gonna close out because I've got to go to a meeting. But just know I am in Washington. I am here working, and hopefully we can get a deal.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. And thank you so much for tonight's panelists and for everyone who tuned in for this important conversation. Your time, insights, and questions really made this discussion meaningful. And as always, our office is here to help. If you have any questions or need any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be posting a recording of this webinar on our website as well as YouTube page. Everyone who registered will also receive a recording of this webinar via email. And if we didn't get to your question, please visit adams.house.gov or give us a call at our DC office. We really appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to the Education Matters webinar hosted by Congresswoman Adams. My name is Ruben Cedillo and I handle education policy work for the Congresswoman. And I will be your MC this evening. Today, we'll be talking about everything that's been going on with education recently. We're going to talk about education funding, how that's impacting North Carolina, the government shutdown, and what that all means for schools, students, and families. Today, we have a really fantastic panel of education professionals here to talk about the impact that they're seeing on the ground and what we can expect in the next few months. Congresswoman Adams will also give you an overview of everything happening in Congress and how that's going to impact education. At the very end of this webinar, we're going to have a Q&A session. So any questions